Boldwood presents The +1 Pact, written by Portia MacIntosh and read by Cara and Cass. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. You can't put a price on finding love. If you could, it wouldn't be £10. I've been playing the dating game for a while now, but I just can't seem to complete it. And I'm usually so good at games. No matter which level I try, there's always a hole to fall down or a monster to eat me, metaphorically speaking, of course. Although with dating apps, you only ever feel a few bad decisions away from ending up in someone's freezer. Recently, I have been using an app called Matcha. You know the drill, swipe left or right on singles in your area, all the while hoping not to get connected with a murderer, or worse, someone who doesn't know what punctuation is. All of my dates so far have ranged from pretty rubbish to monumentally awful. It's safe to say that the date I'm on right now is one of the worst ones. I look down at the £10 note. Holding it out in front of me, gently waggling it to try and encourage me to take it, is Matt. After chatting with Matt on Matcha for over a week, tonight we had our first date. I've had some bad first dates recently, but this is the first time there has been any discussion of money changing hands. Matt, a 28-year-old from Huddersfield, who I matched with while he was in Leeds for the day, caught my eye with his fun-loving profile. Well, he was someone a little different from the young professionals who take themselves too seriously and brag about their latest holidays. It gets a bit tiresome when there's no chemistry to make it worth looking at that photo of them hugging a clearly sedated tiger in Thailand. I agreed to meet Matt on his turf, which was a little out of my comfort zone, but you've got to be willing to meet people in the middle, or Huddersfield, if you want to find love. Everything about dating involves stepping out of your comfort zone. But when I turned up at the address he gave me, it wasn't a bar or a restaurant. It was a house. His house, I assumed, as I hovered outside on the pavement, so relieved I had decided to wear black jeans and a nice top, rather than a dress, because I would have been so annoyed if I'd shaved my legs for this. Naturally, I wanted a scarper, but the front door opened before I had a chance, and a woman in her late 50s stepped out. "You must be Cara," she said warmly, spotting me on the pavement, all smiles as she hurried down the short garden path to give me a big hug. I froze in her arms as my brain tried to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. She was much shorter than me, so her face pressed awkwardly into my chest. She was all dressed up as if she was heading out on a date. Her perfume was overwhelmingly strong and definitely the scent of a more mature lady. A heavy floral scent that reminded me of my grandma's usual go-to perfume. Then it hit me. This woman was dolled up to go out. She said my name. She hugged me as if she knew me. Had it finally happened? Had I finally been catfished? I'd been caught out by guys who were much shorter, heavier or older than their pictures or profiles let on before. As deceptive as it felt, I got it. We all want to show our good side. I'd put filters on my photos and never upload anything where I didn't look my best. But there's a difference between being a different height and being a different everything. "Matt?" I said slowly as the horror set in. "Yes, let me show you inside," she replied, ushering me up the steps. "I'm Lizzie, his mum." I let out a sigh of relief so strong I swear I almost caused the front door to slam closed. As soon as I realised that Lizzie wasn't Matt, I softened, ticking myself off for thinking the worst. I felt so daft for jumping to such a wild conclusion, which is probably why I was so quick to put aside any concerns one might usually have when they turn up to a first date and it's the guy's mum who greets them. Once inside the old stone-terraced house, I was ushered into the living room. There, sitting on a leather corner sofa in a room that was clearly too small to accommodate it, was Matt. The Matt from the photos on his profile, thank God. Tall, skinny, hair spiked up in a way I hadn't seen since the noughties, kind of goofy looking but in a charming way. Next to Matt was a boy of about 10. "Cara!" Matt said with delight, jumping to his feet to give me a hug with a familiarity that you don't usually expect from someone you haven't actually met before. Hi, I said. It was about all I could say. Not only was I nervous, like almost everyone is on a first date, but something just didn't feel quite right. OK, Lizzie said with a clap of her hands. I'm going to get going. There's pizza money under the vase by the door, plenty of pop in the fridge. I'll try not to be late. You three have fun. Great, bye, Mum. Matt called after her. Bye, Gran, the boy said without taking his eyes off the TV. I didn't know what to say. I was just frozen on the spot, standing next to the door. What had I walked into? Should I just leave? I'm so glad you came, Matt said. This is Kieran. Hi, Kieran, I said politely. He said hi without looking at me. He was far too engrossed in the TV show he was watching. It was one of those real-life police shows where they follow officers around on car chases and drug busts. I wasn't entirely sure it was appropriate for a child of his age, but what do I know? Is this your son? I asked. What? No, of course not, he replied. He seemed offended I had asked. Don't you think I would have mentioned that I had a son, if I had a son? Sorry, I said quickly. No worries, come sit down, he said, nudging me towards the sofa, ushering me down next to Kieran. It turned out that Kieran was Matt's nephew, his older sister's son. It didn't sound as though his sister was a very hands-on mum. It seemed more as if Lizzie took care of him. It became very quickly apparent that Lizzie had gone out on a date and that my date with Matt was taking place at the house, with Kieran on the sofa watching his police shows. Honestly, I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. Matt definitely should have mentioned to me that this was what the plan for this evening was, right? Unless it changed last minute, but still he could have texted me. Do you have any kids? None that I know of, I joked. I love making that joke. When men make it, I find it kind of gross, but there's something so funny about a woman saying it. What? He replied, a little taken aback by my reply. None that I know of, I said again, saying it slower this time so he could tell I was kidding. Right, yeah, he replied awkwardly. I guess we all could when you think about it. We really couldn't. So we ordered pizza and we watched old episodes of Road Wars and Banged Up Abroad because it was the only thing Kieran was interested in. My job, which is honestly the least interesting thing I could talk about right now, given how bizarre my date is tonight, involves knowledge of different locks. This was something Matt knew about, so as we watched a young man being arrested for having a belly full of cocaine condoms, seriously, why are people letting a kid watch this kind of thing? He leaned over and assured me that he had a pair of handcuffs that not even I would be able to get out of. The look on his face was so smarmy. The unsubtle grin, the even less subtle wink. Clear indicators that Matt already thought he was in there. At that point, manners be damned, and after 2 hours of enduring, well, whatever this weird non-date was, I knew that it was time to leave. I opened my mouth to announce my departure when Matt's mum, Lizzie, burst back through the door with a gentleman who, based on his appearance, I could only imagine she found in the 80s. He had the big hair, the tight trousers, he even had the self-important swagger of a rock star. For some reason, he had a dodgy fake tan job, making his leathery skin an intense shade of dark orange. They kissed their way through the door clumsily. Lizzie's date was clearly going to be continuing here at the house. Upstairs, I really didn't think this date could get any more awkward, but Matt's mum heading upstairs for a jump with Tan Halen certainly added a new level of cringe. You crazy kids can get out of here, she told us, drunkenly stumbling forward towards the sofa, subtly handing Matt something before cranking up the volume of the TV and heading upstairs with her date. And so we left. We left the house, with Kieran downstairs watching people get banged up and Lizzie upstairs. I'm not going to finish that sentence. Thanks for hanging out, Matt said to me as soon as we stepped outside. Family is really important to me. It says a lot about you. Well, if your mum needed a babysitter last minute, what can you do? I replied, although I still thought it was weird that he didn't tell me.
Oh, it wasn't a last-minute thing. I just thought I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Get the pizza paid for, you know.
So the date you planned was babysitting? I asked.
Yeah, he replied. What, you think I just hang out with kids for fun?
Matt laughed to himself obliviously before holding up what his mum had handed him. 2 £10 notes. I pursed my lips, speechless. Well, of all the dates I'd been on, no one had ever tricked me into babysitting with them.
At least we can go on a second date now, he said. Now I can afford to go halves.
I felt as if I had hit my limit multiple times over the course of the babysitting date. But this was my last straw. No more manners, no more sparing feelings. I don't think so, I replied. I forewent my usual polite friendliness to be firm.
What? No, come on, he said. I'll give you half my babysitting money, seeing as though you were there too. How about that?
So here I am, standing outside on a warm summer evening, being offered £10 to go on a second date with Matt. I can just about make out his mum's excitable giggles coming from her open bedroom window, and I sincerely hope Kieran hasn't turned the TV down. Keep the money, I tell him. Use it to take Kieran out for an ice cream. Or just put it towards his therapy.
But what about our date? He asks. Or our second date?
Matt looks so disappointed. I think he thought this date had been a roaring success. Sorry, I don't think this is going to work out, I tell him. This is the first time I've had a date bad enough to actually tell the guy a second date isn't going to happen while I'm still on the first one. Then again, tonight wasn't a date, was it? It was babysitting.
What?
He says. And yes, amazingly, he is surprised. I'm sorry. I apologise again, although I'm not sorry. I'm horrified. It's not going to work between us. Matt's face falls. His enthusiasm fades. I'd go as far as to say his usually goofy mask slips off.
Bitch,
he says simply. I feel my eyebrows shoot up with a force. I've never been called a bitch before. Sure, it bothers me as a woman and as a human, but on a personal level, I don't care what Matt thinks of me. All I care about is getting out of here. I turn on my heel and begin the walk to the train station, which thankfully isn't far. I just want to get home, kick off my heels, get into my own bed and just be alone. Obviously, I'm not happy being single, otherwise I wouldn't have resorted to trying to find love on dating apps. But right now, tonight, I feel lucky to be able to go home alone. I'd rather be single than be with someone like Matt. Chapter 2. Who is the most annoying? An actor, a dancer, or a double bass player? I'm not telling you a joke, unless you count my life as being a joke, which I suppose you could. I genuinely can't tell which one is the most annoying. I'm not sure what woke me up this morning. I think it was the sound of a double bass, crashing rather than drifting its way through my open bedroom balcony door, which I opened last night because it was too hot to sleep. Now it's too noisy to sleep instead. I rent a one-bedroom apartment in central Leeds in a really great location. Well, at least I used to think it was. It has a small balcony off both the bedroom and a cool open-plan living space with a view across the city centre, starting at the swanky Victoria Gate shopping centre across the road, stretching across Leeds. I can see all the sights, including the Pinnacle building that stands tall in the centre of the city. I remember the day I moved in here. After I'd spent hours and hours unpacking and setting things up, the day turned into night, and I looked out of my bedroom window and saw the word Pinnacle shining in big bright white letters. Having grown up in a small village just outside Leeds and suddenly finding myself in a super cool city centre apartment about to start my dream job, it felt like a very appropriate message to have floating out there in the night sky. I felt as if I had finally made it. When I got in last night, after my disastrous date, I kicked off my shoes, stepped out of my clothes, and as I climbed into bed, ready to put the evening behind me, I noticed that the lights in the Pinnacle sign were out in almost all of the letters. All of them except the L. Last night, having a big, bright, impossible-to-miss L for loser hovering outside my bedroom window felt even more appropriate. One of the perks of mostly working from home is not only being able to go on ultimately disappointing midweek dates without having to worry about what time you get in, but also being able to sleep in whenever you feel like it. But living where I live, I have no such luck. Originally, I thought it was an awesome artistic place to be, sandwiched between Northern Ballet and Leeds Playhouse, and being a creative person, I felt as if I was living in the heart of creativity and expression. Unfortunately, this means that my building is full of musicians, actors and dancers, and they are a little too expressive, especially when it comes to rehearsing. Right now, I can hear the thudding of feet above me, the almost creepy sound of a double bass from somewhere below, and if I hear the person in the flat next door to me bellow, "Ready to lower boat, sir," one more time, so help me God. I have managed to deduce, from what has been put on the notice board downstairs, that at the moment most people are rehearsing for either Le Diable Amoureux or Moby Dick. I am literally trapped between the devil and the deep blue sea, and even when these two shows are over, there will be different plays, different ballets, new people renting the apartments that surround me. That's why I am in the process of trying to find somewhere new to live. I genuinely live in fear of Stomp coming to town. While my job is a creative one, it is one that requires a great deal of care and concentration too. My mum tells people that I lock people up for a living, which usually makes them think I'm a police officer. My dad tells people I lock people up and watch them try to escape, which usually makes them think I'm some kind of dominatrix. I work for Houdini's Great Escape, a company that has escape rooms up and down the country. Their flagship branch is right here in Leeds, and I was lucky enough to bag a job designing rooms for them. I've always loved puzzles, jigsaws when I was a kid, a little pocket book of Sudoku when I used to commute, endless puzzle apps on my phone. All far easier than playing the dating game on Matcha, that's for sure. Escape rooms are basically just a room full of puzzles of all different types. Figuring out number codes, opening puzzle boxes, finding hidden messages on the wall, and locks. Lots and lots of locks. Each puzzle needs to lead seamlessly and sensibly into another, ultimately leading up to the unlocking of a door. I come up with themes for the different rooms, draw up blueprints, and create the pathway that players will follow. I absolutely love it, but it's so hard to do when you can't think straight, and one little mistake could throw the whole room off. I've known for a while that I need to move if I want to get my work done in peace, and I thought I'd found somewhere, so I gave notice that I was moving out of here. Except things fell through with the new place, and my landlord had already found someone else to move in here after I moved out, so now I'm having to try and find somewhere against the clock. You'd think this would motivate me, and it does, but I do need to get on with my work too. I have a few places I'm going to look at next week. One of them has got to be okay, right? Okay will work, so long as it's okay and quiet. Despite it being a Thursday afternoon, today has big Monday morning energy. This week has felt like a week full of Mondays, and today is dragging just the same. I suppose I should get ready soon. I'm heading to my parents' house for dinner. They only live a short train journey outside Leeds, so I see them and my brother quite often. But we make a point of having dinner as a family every other week. The only thing that could make my day worse would be piling into a commuter train, standing for the entire 20-minute journey, probably with my face pressed up against the dirty glass door, murky from a day's worth of fingerprints. I'll hop in the shower, throw on some clothes, and hurry for the train. Once I'm at my parents' place, I can sit in front of a fan, drink lemonade, and just enjoy the peace and quiet that comes with living on the edge of the moors. The only thing that could potentially ruin the nice quiet evening of my dreams is if the subject of my cousin's wedding comes up, which it almost always does. But I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. My phone, vibrating on the desk in front of me, snaps me from my thoughts. I have a notification telling me that I have a new match on Matcher. I open up the app and instinctively reject the first person it shows me with a swipe to the left. Almost everyone gets swiped away these days. I'm about to go and check my new match when I realise that it's showing me a message that I haven't seen before. I squint at it suspiciously until I realise what it says. No more matches, check back soon. It turns out I have run out of people to match with in my area, meaning I have swiped my way through every vaguely eligible bachelor, plus a few married ones who it always amazes me are lurking on the app, in Leeds. It's official. I have run out of men. Well, you know what? Good riddance to bad rubbish. This app has been nothing but trouble. I guess I'll just go back to playing Candy Crush when I'm bored, rather than swiping my way through men who just aren't worth shaving my legs for. I place my phone on charge to give it a boost before I leave and head into the bathroom to get ready. This escape room isn't going to plan itself, but right now, all I can think about is escaping my own room. Of course, once I'm in a room with my mum and dad, chatting about the wedding of the century, I'll probably want to escape that one too. Chapter 3. It's only now that I live in the city that I truly appreciate what a gorgeous place I grew up in. At the time, my family home just felt like a house, but it was all I'd ever known. Growing up was like something out of The Railway Children. Literally, my parents' house was next to the steam train line where the movie was filmed. Their back garden actually backs onto the line, which meant that we would often be able to watch as the old steam engine passed the bottom of our garden. No one uses it to travel from A to B. There are much faster, cheaper ways. It's a tourist attraction, one that pulls in people from all over the globe. Living right next to it, we wouldn't go on it all that often. Just once a year as kids when we would take a trip on the annual Santa train at Christmas time. The man who played Santa actually looked a hell of a lot like Santa Claus, with his grey beard, his rounded belly and his jolly smile. So when he would take the train for fun on a fairly regular basis, if my brother and I were playing in the back garden when he passed, he would always give us a wave through the window. Of course, we were convinced that he was the real Santa Claus, which is probably why we were such well-behaved kids. Our parents really drummed into us that Santa Claus was always watching, which feels highly manipulative, but I have to admit it's a stroke of genius. My brother, Oliver, still lives with my parents in their 3-bedroom detached house. It's a conversion of a building that is believed to date back to the 18th century. It looks picture perfect. Aged but not old. Traditional but not old-fashioned. It has always been well kept, sitting in a garden full of various plants and flowers. It's like something out of a romance movie. The kind of place you inherit, although in the movies they're usually in need of a lot of work, before falling in love with the hunky next-door neighbour. The only person next door here is a retired doctor in his 90s, and I'm betting it's been a long time since he made anyone say, "Ah." Oliver is younger than me. I'm 29 with 30 breathing down my neck. Oliver is 23 with the world at his feet. Well, that's what my parents seem to think anyway. Oliver is their most viable child, having breezed his way through his bachelor's degree, his master's, and now he's doing a fully funded PhD. I don't think they are more proud of Oliver, or that they love him more than they love me or anything like that. I just feel as if it's easier to be more conventionally proud of him. Whereas I'm pushing 30, with a kind of weird job, living my best spinster life. All of my old school friends are married with kids. You can't blame people for measuring my success against the people I grew up with, even if it's not really fair. I decided after my disastrous date last night that a trip to see my family was what I needed. Real people who actually cared about me, with no ulterior motive, giving me the time of day. The 4 of us, me, Oliver and my parents, are currently sitting around the table in their spacious farmhouse kitchen, eating dinner. We're having salmon in a sticky honey and lemon glaze, which is my absolute favourite. I know that Oliver isn't a huge fan, so we don't have it all that often on family dinner night. Would you say you were in a good mindset today? My mum asks. I shift uncomfortably in my seat. That's a strange question to ask, isn't it? Yes, I reply. I suppose so. I mean, I'm not exactly in a great mood. Last night was pretty disturbing, and today wasn't a very productive day. I guess I'm fine, though. So, if I had some news that you might not be all that happy with, now might be a good time to tell you? She continues. My fork slips from my fingers and clatters against my plate. Mum, what kind of question is that? I ask. The kind that makes sure you're in the mindset for potentially upsetting news, she says. OK, sure, but you've already tipped me off to the bad news, I point out, so whether you're telling me it or not, I know that there is bad news. It doesn't matter what it is. My brain is filling in the blanks for me, with ideas potentially worse than the thing itself. My God! I puff air from my cheeks. I feel in a right flap now. I pick my fork back up and reacquaint myself with my dinner. It's a shame I can't get it to take away or I'd be off. I'm not in the mood for a Brooks family drama.
For God's sake,
my dad, Ted, says, clearly annoyed to be having his dinner interrupted with a woman either side of him low-key bickering across his plate. He turns to me.
Cara, Lloyd is coming to Flora's wedding. There.
Lloyd? I shriek. Lloyd? My ex-Lloyd?
How many Lloyds do you know?
Oliver asks with a chuckle. I meaningfully stab a carrot and pop it in my mouth with all the angst of a stroppy teenager.
Don't be mardy,
my dad insists.
Your mum worked hard on dinner. It doesn't deserve to be stabbed so violently.
I roll my eyes. Isn't it weird how being back in your family home can make you feel like a kid again? Ted Brooks is your classic Yorkshire dad. Honestly, he's straight off a postcard in a Yorkshire gift shop. Strong and silent, apart from when he's straight talking, and awkwardly frugal, unless he's buying things like cuts of meat or beer. I've always found his generation of ultra-proud Yorkshire-born, Yorkshire-bred Yorkshiremen to be a mess of contradictions. Simple creatures, but still somehow impossible to figure out. My dad is a fairly big bloke, but a gentle giant. My mum, especially when she's standing next to him, is perfectly petite, reaching in on her tiptoes at just over 5 foot tall. Annie Brooks looks quite funny next to her husband. Once, when we were all walking up Malham Cove for fun one weekend, not really my idea of fun, walking is a bit too much like exercising for my liking, my dad started chatting with a man and his family. The man, who couldn't see my mum's face behind her scarf, asked my dad how old his daughters were. My mum does look good for her age, though. She has sleek, dark bobbed hair and almost always has a good covering of makeup on. That must be where I got it from, feeling the need to wear makeup every day. I enjoy wearing it, though, and have a lot of fun applying it. One of these days I'll take a proper class, rather than just messing around in my bedroom, usually for no one's benefit but my own. Then again, I suppose that's what my feminist brother would prefer me to say. Oliver has my mum's dark colouring and skinny frame, but it's stretched to a height to rival my dad's. I really don't know who I take after, to be honest. I'm 5'7", which is taller than average for a woman, but unremarkably so. All it means is that I have size 8 feet, which makes shoe shopping kind of inconvenient sometimes. My height puts me about halfway between my mum and my dad. And I suppose my chest-length dark blonde hair puts my colouring at that midpoint between my dark-haired mum and my fair-haired dad. Sorry, Dad. I'm a little upset because you just told me that my cousin is inviting my ex-boyfriend to her wedding. I can't believe her. It's her wedding day, my mum reminds me, as though I could have forgotten that the wedding of the century is soon to take place. My cousin Flora's long-anticipated wedding is less than 2 months away now. Flora, 28, is the only child of my Auntie Mhairi, my mum's only sister. When Tommy popped the question a couple of years ago, it wasn't long before Flora asked me to be her bridesmaid. We're cousins, we're not friends or anything. So I was surprised when she asked me. We don't socialise, and we're definitely not what you would call close. We never really got on much when we were kids because Flora had that only child mentality some kids are just cursed with. She always had to have her own way, and I, being a whole year older than her, usually had to give in to whatever demands she made. In some ways that hasn't changed. Well, not until a few months ago, when I finally broke the cycle. I feel like she's punishing me, I point out, between mouthfuls of new potatoes. She's just being petty. Well, we do all really like Lloyd, my mum says. Yeah, but Flora doesn't, I insist. I mean, she didn't when we were together, and even if she did, why is my ex-boyfriend still invited to her wedding? It's nearly a year since I broke up with Lloyd, and he didn't exactly take it all that well. It was a year before our breakup when Flora invited us to her wedding, but she only invited Lloyd because he was my boyfriend at the time, so why would that invitation stand after our breakup? Flora and Tommy want to honour his invitation, my mum explains. They think it would be rude not to. But it isn't rude to invite my ex, who I am not on speaking terms with, I say. Has he said he's coming? Yes, but Flora said you can still have a +1. My mum points out. God, I'm going to need one now. I wasn't really feeling the pressure too much before, but if I have to go to this thing alone, then I'm going to wind up saddled with my ex all day, an ex that I specifically haven't stayed friends with. Lloyd and I broke up on pretty bad terms. He was jealous, possessive, and had no boundaries. The fact that he's still saying he'll come to Flora's wedding, all the way from Somerset, just goes to show how little he's changed. He's a 28-year-old man, for crying out loud. This is like something a high school girl would do. My appetite well and truly beat. I put my cutlery down before dropping my head into my hands. I massage my temples for a moment. She's punishing me, I say. This is because I dropped out of being her bloody bridesmaid. I know that it sounds bad to agree to be a bridesmaid for someone before backtracking, but I had a really good reason, I swear.
Don't forget how upset Auntie Mhairi is that you did it over WhatsApp,
Oliver points out. I roll my eyes. Auntie Mhairi is of the opinion that I added insult to injury by bowing out over WhatsApp. Not even a text. That's all she keeps saying, being too out of touch to know that the two forms of communication aren't really any different. The reason I sent Flora a message instead of talking to her on the phone is because I had already tried raising my concerns with her in person, but she kept shutting them down. I thought it best to write down exactly how I was feeling in clear but very tactful terms. The last thing I wanted to do was upset her.
Maybe she was looking forward to you being her bridesmaid,
my dad suggests. I can tell he's had enough of this conversation, but he isn't the only one. I doubt it, I reply. We're not exactly close, are we? It felt like an empty gesture at best. Otherwise, I reckon it was just to keep the numbers up. I did have a good reason for not wanting to be Flora's bridesmaid, honestly. Well, I thought it was a good reason, but Flora and Auntie Mhairi weren't in agreement with me. It all started when we went for our first dress fitting. The dresses were already there waiting for us, and it turned out that Flora was planning on using the bridesmaid dresses from her mum's wedding, that none of her mum's bridesmaids wanted to keep, which isn't a surprise to me having seen them. They haven't aged well at all over the past 30 or so years. Somehow impossibly shiny, but still with the texture of crepe paper, the dresses would be serving as Flora's something old, oh so old, and something borrowed. Yes, her mum wanted them back after. And as far as I was concerned, my dress was going to be her something blue, too. You see, it just so happened that Auntie Mhairi had 4 bridesmaids, 2 adults and 2 kids. The dress that I was told to try on was actually the dress my mum wore when she was Auntie Mhairi's bridesmaid. But my mum was quite slim back then, and I, today, am not. I wouldn't say I'm overweight, but I'm not going to be walking any Victoria's Secret catwalks anytime soon. I'd say I'm kind of average size, just with a few extra curves. And it's because of my curves up top that the old bridesmaid dress intended for me to wear just wouldn't fit. I had a little trouble after stepping into it, getting it over my butt, but as soon as it came to fitting my chest into it, it just wasn't going to happen. Hence the something blue. It would be practically pornographic if I were to walk down the aisle with my boobs out, and all because I can't get some solid as a rock, 80s floral antique curtain-looking dress over them. Honestly, it was one of the ugliest dresses I have ever seen in my life, and obviously I didn't want to wear it. But I would have worn it because it was what Flora wanted. Except Auntie Mhairi didn't want her old dresses hacking up to make alterations so that the dress would fit me as I am. What Auntie Mhairi suggested to me, instead of changing the dress, was that I changed myself by losing weight. Obviously, I wasn't going to lose weight to fit into a bloody dress, and even if I did lose weight, I couldn't exactly guarantee that my boobs would shrink, could I? No one would listen when I tried to explain that I wasn't going to crash diet to fit into a bridesmaid dress, which was why I wound up having to send her a very sugar-coated version of my feelings in a WhatsApp message. I'll just need to find a date, I say. Any date, I just need a man.
I can't believe out of the two of us, I'm the better feminist, Oliver eventually pipes up again with a laugh.
Just because I need a man and won't wear a bridesmaid dress that shows my bra, I'm a bad feminist, I say. I wouldn't lose weight for a dress, remember?
Yeah, there is that, he agrees. You know, in The Handmaid's Tale...
Oh, give me strength. My brother is writing his PhD on the male ego and female empowerment in contemporary US hip-hop, which apparently makes him the authority on feminism in this house. I am all for feminism, but I don't need to lecture on how women shouldn't be calling other women bitches because the patriarchy wants to set women against other women. Every time I say someone is a bitch, especially not from my woke little brother. I can't believe he's actually coming, I say. The man lives in Somerset. Lloyd and I were together for 3 years. He lived in Leeds while he was at uni, but after he finished his master's degree, he temporarily moved back in with his parents, in Somerset. The plan was to figure out our next steps, but we never had the chance. The distance magnified all of the small insecurities I'd noted Lloyd having over the years. His paranoia tore us apart. Not only that, though, the time apart also gave me the space to realise that we just weren't that happy together. He wasn't the one. Trying to talk to him about this only brought out an anger in him. That was when we broke up. And that was the last time we spoke. Is he actually going to travel all this way and stay in a hotel just so he can attend Flora and Tommy's wedding? I ask, although I suppose it makes sense. If he's as clingy as he was before, he'll think this is his way back in. Well... My mum pauses for a moment. I watch as she shakes off the anguished look on her face, forcing it into something much softer and brighter. You know how much we all loved Lloyd, how he felt like part of the family?
Oh, God, no. He's staying here, my dad blurts.
Ted clearly has no time for sugarcoating today. What? I squeak. Here at your house?
No, in the shed, Oliver says sarcastically.
Where is he going to sleep?
I ask, but my brain figures that one out for me a split second after I ask the question.
You're letting him sleep in my room, aren't you? Well, you don't actually sleep in it, do you? My mum reminds me. You live in your own flat. I assumed you'd be sleeping there before the wedding. You're only 20 minutes away on the train. It's still my bedroom, I say. My childhood bedroom. I don't want him in there. And when I did want him in there, I wasn't actually allowed to have him in there. Even though we were in our 20s, my parents have always been old-fashioned like that. This has to be some kind of horrible prank. My mum stands up and begins clearing the table. It's just for a few days, she says as she heads for the kitchen. I'll fetch the pudding. A few days, I reply. He's staying here for a few days?
The lad fancied a break,
my dad tells me. He leans in to speak quietly to me while my mum is out of the room.
Come on, it's a few days. You don't live here. You know your mum really liked him. She's just doing the lad a favour.
I fold my arms and slump down into my chair. I can't believe it. I really can't believe it. This is classic Lloyd, muscling his way back into my life the first chance he gets. There is no way he just wants to watch Flora and Tommy get married. He never liked them and they never liked him. I get why my mum is saying that Lloyd can stay here because she always had a huge soft spot for him. And obviously she was never privy to the reasons why we broke up. She just thought it was the distance. I didn't have the heart to tell her how intense Lloyd turned out to be after he moved back to Somerset. My mum is just being my usual lovely mum. But Flora is something else. Her inviting Lloyd is definitely some kind of payback for me refusing to slim into a dress for her. She has no reason to invite him otherwise. I notice my phone vibrating on the table, so I snatch it up, hoping it's something that isn't going to annoy me. Oh, it's a matcha message from someone called Chad. I tune out from Oliver attempting to explain to my dad how the media pit Nicki Minaj and Cardi B against each other. My dad has no idea who either of these people are, and lose myself in my phone. A few taps on my iPhone tell me that Chad was the person I matched with earlier before I swiped away the last available man in my area. That makes Chad the last man standing. My last hope? Well, my last chance to find someone in time for this wedding, at least, if I drop the melodramatics for a second.
I know the answer to your riddle, his message states simply.
OK, I know it makes me sound like a big nerd, having a riddle in my matcha bio. But, well, I am a big nerd, and it's important to show people that right off the bat, right? Hello? I begin my reply. Go on. Almost immediately, those 3 little dots appear to show me that Chad is typing. The riddle at the end of my bio says, Jake Gyllenhaal has a long one, Brad Pitt has a short one, Drake doesn't have one. What is it? Well, I love puzzles, and I thought that was kind of a fun question, and not an overly difficult one. People tend to ignore it or just ask me what the answer is. No one has been all that impressed yet. He types back.
The answer is a surname. Ha ha. Cheeky though, I like it.
Oh, not only does he get it, but he thinks it's funny too. He asks,
What's a nice girl like you doing on an app like Matcha?
I knew you'd come around. My mum interrupts, pulling my eyes away from my phone for a second. Huh? I reply, looking up just in time to see her placing a cheesecake on the table in front of us. A homemade passion fruit cheesecake, which is one of my favourite desserts. She really has brought out the big guns to try and offset the damage from the Lloyd crap bomb that's been dropped on me. You're smiling, she tells me. Oh, I'm just on Twitter. I insist. I must be grinning like an idiot at my phone. I punch back to Chad. A nice girl like me was just about to give up on Matcha for good. What's a nice boy like you doing here? He replies almost instantly.
Saving you.
Damn, what a charmer. He continues.
Sounds like I arrived just in time. Give me tonight to message you my A-game, and if you like what you read, let me take you on a date tomorrow evening. What do you say? What are you looking at?
My dad asks me suspiciously. Me? Nothing. I insist.
Something on that phone has you grinning like the cat that got the cream.
He replies. I shrug my shoulders. I'm hardly going to tell my dad I'm flirting with someone on a dating app, am I? Just memes, I say.
Not the foggiest what that means,
he says, but I don't think he cares. My mum hands my dad a cup of tea, which he proceeds to put down on the dining table. On the coaster, my mum insists.
Bloody women,
my dad mutters under his breath, while doing as he is told, obviously. Naturally, this statement triggers Oliver, who calls my dad out for his sexist statement. My phone buzzes again.
Cara?
Chad prompts me. Wow, a double message. He is keen. I reply, sounds like a plan. He replies,
Great, let's see if we can't find you your happy ever after.
That's a kind of cheesy thing to say, but I allow myself a moment of optimism. I know that I haven't exactly been winning the dating game recently, but maybe it was all for a reason. All to get me to this point, so that the last man on Matcha could ask me on a date. Now I really do feel as if I'm in a rom-com movie. And this little glimmer of hope couldn't have come at a better time, could it? Desperately in need of a +1 and on the verge of giving up on men altogether.